Hello friends, my name's Emile. Now, back in the mid-90s, GT racing was dominated by the McLaren F1. However, clouds were soon on the horizon. Porsche had developed the 911 GT1, a car specifically designed to go GT racing. The rules for the IFA GT Championship at the time stated that the racing vehicle must be based on production vehicles. However, manufacturers were only required to produce 25 cars. As such, many barely road legal race cars were produced specifically so the manufacturer could compete in the series, and 3 of those vehicles are here today. The first of these is the McLaren F1 GT. In order to keep up with the homologated vehicles, extensive modifications had to be made to the F1 to the point where some road-going versions of this modified F1 had to be produced. Known as the F1 GT, the car sported heavily modified bodywork to allow for less drag but more downforce. Apart from the bodywork, the F1 GT car retained most of the traits of the standard F1, however it was considerably lighter. So how does this modified McLaren drive? Well, it's actually quite nice, with it being easy and very forgiving. Even a novice wouldn't have many issues in this vehicle. It handles great with no notable understeer or oversteer. However, while they are okay, the brakes are a little on the spongy side. Beware of bumps too, as they can very easily upset the F1 GT. Gear ratios in the F1 GT are long, with it obviously being geared for speed. Despite this, the F1 GT can still hit 60 miles per hour in just 3.2 seconds. This is where the problem lies, however. While the GT is great, the aerodynamics of the car hold it back, with the top speed being slower than the standard car at 221 miles per hour. Ultimately, the standard car handles almost the same, but with better straight line speed thanks to less aero, so I would find it difficult to recommend over the standard F1. So let's take a look at one of the F1 GT's main rivals. This is the Mercedes-Benz CLK GTR. Despite sharing some of its looks with the standard production CLK, this is a very different vehicle, featuring a mid-mounted 6.9 litre Mercedes V12 producing 622 horsepower. Interestingly, the CLK was developed using an F1 GTR race car as a test mule, with Mercedes gradually fitting various aerodynamic parts meant for the CLK, and eventually dropping in their own engine, allowing the Germans to completely perfect the aerodynamics before even starting production. The CLK performed well, securing the team and drivers championships. The road version of the car became the most expensive car of its day, with a price tag of over $1.5 million US. In-game, the CLK GTR is, well, exceptional. It is extremely nice to drive, with super controllable and predictable handling. Upsetting the CLK is a difficult task indeed. The brakes are fantastic, being some of the most powerful I've ever used, and the CLK benefits from much tighter gear ratios than the F1 GT, as well as a quicker gear change thanks to some paddle mounted shifters. The only real negative point is that while the straight line speed is good, with a 0 to 60 time of 3.8 seconds and a top speed of 198 miles per hour, it is slower than the F1 GT. Still, for me, this is the better vehicle. However, there is one more alternative. This is the Nissan R390. Like the F1 GT and the CLK, the R390 was specifically designed for racing. However, this car was designed for the 24 Hours of Le Mans endurance race. On paper, the engine is a little underwhelming compared to the other two, with a 3.5 litre V8. However, it still managed to crank out 641 horsepower in race tune. This road car, however, is restricted to 550 horsepower. Due to Le Mans rules, only 2 R390s were ever built, with one ending up at Nissan's warehouse, while the other one was sold to an unknown Nissan enthusiast. Nothing much is known about this vehicle, although it is said to be registered in Britain. Onto the driving, and the R390 was the hardest of all the vehicles here today to drive. While the handling is decent, the R390 can be very twitchy, and can be upset by sudden throttle movements, as well as bumps. However, the brakes are good, not quite as good as the CLK, but better than the McLaren F1. The R390's strength, however, is in its acceleration. It's fantastic. Although the 0 to 60 time of 3.9 seconds makes it the slowest of the three cars here today. Past that, the R390 is easily the fastest accelerating thanks to its close gear ratios and light weight. The R390 tops out at 200 miles per hour and can easily reach this speed here on Le Mans, even with the chicanes. The R390 is the hardest to drive vehicle here, but in the hands of a skilled driver this car can be very quick indeed. However, how will all of these cars cope around our track? Let's go and find out. Onto the track, and the McLaren F1 GT was the first car to go around here today. Now this has the most middling stats of all these vehicles. It's in between on power, torque and indeed weight, so we'll have to see what that means around the track. Through the first corner it's looking relatively planted there, no drama whatsoever through there. Of course this car would be in first, second and third gear most of the way around this track. I don't even think our driver used fourth. Little bit of understeer into that second corner, and on the way out however it looks fairly planted. Of course didn't go down into that gully. If you go down into that little dip then that can really upset the car, and in the F1 GT that could really upset it. Through Hammerhead, and quite a notable bit of understeer through there actually, taking out some of the cones on the outside. However that of course means you do get a bit of a wider line onto the straight, which means you can take more speed. Through into the follow through and taking a surprising amount of speed in the F1 GT. This is a good handling vehicle, however it's really showing its worth around here. Now coming up to the second to last corner, this is where it could get a little bit tricky for the F1 GT because of its slightly bad brakes. However, looks fairly planted through there. And coming round into the last corner, a little bit of slide, but across the line cleanly. Next up we've got the Mercedes CLK GTR, the most powerful of all these vehicles, however it is the heaviest, so we'll have to see what that means around the track. Now coming into that first corner, of course, those massively good brakes will be slowing him down tremendously through there. That means that you can really shave some seconds off the lap time. A little bit of a slide on the way out, however nothing that we can't handle. Going in to the second corner, and he's going a little bit wide. Once again managing to avoid that gully just about. Of course the CLK GTR isn't as upset by bumps as the R390 and the F1 GTR. Overall it's pretty decent. Going into Hammerhead, no understeer to report of by the looks of it, unlike the F1 GT, which is pretty good especially for a big wide car such as this one. Now coming through the follow through, this is where the CLK GTR will be able to make up some serious pace because it is hugely quick around the corners. Dipped a little wheel into the hole, but other than that fairly decent. Through the tyres it was hugely quick. Now the second to last corner, this will be done very nicely I suspect. Yes it will, pretty decent around the second to last corner. And coming around the last corner, no real dramas, and across the line. Finally we have the R390, the trickiest of all the vehicles here to drive. However it does have the least amount of weight, and lightweight cars usually do very well around this track. Now of course you can't take quite the same amount of speed as you could through the first corner as you could with the CLK, because again it's slightly trickier and the brakes aren't quite as good. A little bit of tail out action there, but nothing our driver can't handle. Coming into the second corner, and yep, understeer and a little bit of oversteer on the way out, surprisingly, from the R390. Yeah, this really is a very scary vehicle to drive. Coming through Hammerhead, will we have understeer or will it be clean like the CLK? That's pretty spot on. Little bit of tail out action on the way out, but overall once again a pretty clean go through the Hammerhead. Now coming onto the follow through, let's see how much speed we take. Ooh, we're taking quite a bit of speed, almost oversteered in fact into the other lane. Coming through the tyres, pretty good. Second to last corner on the brakes, and that was done pretty much spot on. Maybe a bit too much brake action before there, but still pretty good. And across the line. Moving on to the times, the Mercedes CLK GTR went into 14th with a 1:13.416, and the McLaren F1 GT went into 16th with a 1:13.753. Both are fantastic times, beating out 650S, Maserati MC12, Lamborghini Huracan. The R390, however, was the biggest surprise of the day, going into 6th with a 1:12.406, beating out a Lykan Hypersport, Hennessy Venom GT, Koenigsegger Gera. I mean, that Venom GT has almost double the power of this car. In fact, it has over double the power, and that was incredible. However, if I was to pick one of these vehicles to actually buy and own out of all of these three, it would be the CLK GTR. This is by far the best driving vehicle here today, and realistically the quickest, thanks to its slightly more settled handling. You can be much more consistent in the CLK. The R390 is good, but it's a little bit too tricky for me, and the McLaren F1 GT is a pretty decent car, but it's a million credits more than the CLK, and you really are not getting a million credits more worth of car. Anyway friends, hopefully you enjoyed this little review comparison video. I'll try and get back into these. So yeah, thank you all very much for watching. My name's been The Real Emile. Until next time, farewell.